Tuesday evening, rush hour, Culiacan, Sinaloa, 8:15 p.m. In the parking lot of a KFC in the Tres Rios district, three young men are laughing at a phone screen. They're dressed identically, bright orange jackets, orange delivery bags slung over their shoulders. To anyone driving past, it looks like three delivery riders on a break. It isn't. It's a bit. A social media stunt. The kind of harmless, low-stakes content that gets a following of hundreds of thousands to stop scrolling for 30 seconds. One of the three is live-streaming the whole thing, narrating for an audience that, at this exact moment, has no idea they're about to watch someone die. A motorcycle pulls up. Two riders, both helmeted. For a second, maybe two, nothing happens. Then the driver raises his arm. The shot is fired at point-blank range into the head of the man holding the phone. The stream cuts. The bike is already gone before the screaming starts. Here's the anomaly in this one, and it isn't a piece of physical evidence the way it usually is in these cases. It's a case of mistaken identity, and it's the first thing investigators get wrong. Local police arrive, take one look at the orange uniforms, and log the killing as exactly what it appears to be. A delivery driver, shot dead in a robbery or a random act of violence. Just another name added to a list that, in this corner of Mexico, is already far too long. It takes hours for that story to fall apart, because the man in the orange jacket wasn't delivering food. His name was César Gastélum, 24 years old, content creator, comedian. A following of close to 600,000 people on TikTok alone, built one sketch and one live stream at a time. And in the space of one evening, the story goes from a forgettable line in a police blotter to a homicide the president of Mexico is being asked to answer for by the next morning. Sit with the size of that gap for a second, between unidentified delivery worker and live-streamed execution of a public figure, watched by his own audience in real time. That's not a small correction. That's the entire scale of the story changing in a matter of hours. And it tells you something about what's coming. In this case, almost nothing is what it first looks like. To understand why this case is being watched so closely, not just in Sinaloa, but by the president's own security cabinet, you have to understand who César Gastélum actually was online. The picture is more complicated than influencer killed by cartel, and the complications matter. On TikTok, under the handle @CésarGastelum04, Gastelum built an audience of roughly 577,000 people and more than 22 million likes, almost entirely on comedy. Sketches, characters, dares, slice-of-life videos filmed around Culiacan. On YouTube, nearly 200 videos, vlogs, road trips, reaction content, gaming sessions. On Kick, he streamed informally under the alias Compa Cesar, chatting with whoever showed up. This is the profile of a working content creator, not a criminal figure. A young man from Sinaloa who turned a phone camera and a sense of humor into an actual career. But two of his recurring characters are the reason his own posts are now part of a homicide investigation. One was Profe Alducin, a teacher parody. The other, more pointed, was a character fans nicknamed the Padre Bellico, the war-ready priest. Dressed as a Sinaloan clergyman, surrounded by trappings of wealth, Gastelum would perform a mock blessing, a prayer played for laughs, asking for protection from being stopped at military and police checkpoints, naming specifically state police, the National Guard, and soldiers under Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch. It's satire, regional, dark, unmistakably tongue-in-cheek, and it split his own audience before he ever became a headline. Some fans loved it as a biting, accurate parody of daily life in a cartel-contested city. Practicing Catholics, meanwhile, criticized the priest costume itself as disrespectful, regardless of the jokes underneath it. Here's what matters for this investigation, stated as precisely as the record allows. Mexico's federal security cabinet has confirmed that some of Gastelum's posts are now being reviewed for references to a criminal faction, and that this is one active line of inquiry into a motive. What officials have not done, as of this recording, is draw a straight line between that content and his murder. Journalists covering the case have specifically cautioned against that leap. Gastelum, by every account gathered so far, wasn't an open mouthpiece for any cartel faction. He made jokes about the world around him. Whether one of those jokes cost him his life is, right now, still a question, not a finding. That distinction is going to matter for the rest of this story. If this were an isolated case, it would already be shocking enough. It isn't isolated. And that's arguably the more disturbing part of this story. Go back to September 2024. Flyers start appearing on the streets of Culiacan, printed lists of names, influencers, small business owners, local personalities, all publicly accused, with no due process and no verification, of ties to one cartel faction or another. It's an old cartel intimidation tactic, repurposed for the influencer age. Instead of a rumor passed between neighbors, it's a printed list, nailed up in public, turning a follower count into a target list. The flyers appear right as the Sinaloa cartel is tearing itself apart from the inside. Its co-founder, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, is handed over to U.S. authorities in the summer of 2024. His family has always maintained he was betrayed and delivered against his will by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, a son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Whatever the true mechanics of that handover, the result isn't in dispute. Two factions, Los Mayos and Los Chapitos, at war for the same territory. Culiacan becomes the front line. Local reporting has since counted at least a dozen social media influencers killed across Sinaloa since that flyer campaign began, most of them in Culiacan itself. César Gastélum wasn't a distant observer of that number. In December 2024, he posted a photo at the grave of a close friend and fellow creator, Leobardo Aispuro, known online as El Gordo Perucci, another influencer killed in Sinaloa before him. Gastelum wrote that he'd never forget his friend's advice, and that he'd keep imagining him watching from above, telling him not to slow down. He was, in other words, already living inside the exact pattern that would eventually kill him. And the clearest precedent of all reaches beyond Sinaloa entirely. In May 2025, a 23-year-old beauty influencer named Valeria Marquez was shot dead in Zapopan, Jalisco, live, on TikTok, inside the salon where she worked, after telling her own followers beforehand that she was afraid. It took 14 months, but this past July, authorities announced the arrest of a Jalisco New Generation cartel-linked figure they allege ordered that killing. The gunman who actually pulled the trigger has never been identified. What stands out here isn't just the similarity between Valeria's case and Cesar's. It's the timeline. A documented, escalating, publicly reported pattern of violence against live-streaming influencers, running for nearly 2 years, with dozens of names attached, and the institutional response arriving case by case, killing by killing, almost always after the fact. That's the blind spot in this story. Not one department's failure, but an entire environment where being a young person with a phone and an audience became, in this specific region, a genuine occupational hazard, long before anyone with the power to intervene treated it as one. Strip away the speculation for a moment and look only at what investigators actually had to work with in the first hours. The scene. A stretch of Boulevard Enrique Sanchez Alonso at its corner with Josefa Ortiz de Dominguez inside the Tres Rios development. A detail worth sitting with because it places this killing within a few hundred meters of the Sinaloa State Prosecutor's office itself. Whoever pulled the trigger did so close enough to smell the building where the investigation into that same shooting would open within the hour. Crime scene technicians cordoned off the KFC parking lot. Casings recovered from the pavement went for ballistic analysis. Security cameras, the restaurants, the surrounding businesses, the traffic cameras along the boulevard, were pulled for review, an effort to build one continuous picture of the motorcycle's route in and out of the area. Gastelum's body was transferred to the State Forensic Medical Service for a mandatory autopsy. A formal investigation file was opened the same night. What that footage and the live stream recording together confirm, even before any lab result comes back: two assailants riding a white Honda dual-purpose motorcycle marked in red and black, both wearing jeans, one in a gray shirt and one in black, one in an orange helmet and the other dark. The driver fired a single handgun round at close range into Gastelum as he stood near the drive-through exit. His two companions, who had been recording alongside him, part of the same bit, were physically unharmed. They were also, whether they wanted the role or not, now witnesses to an assassination. None of this required a lab to interpret. It required patience and a full accounting of every camera within reach. The same forensic discipline true crime investigations always rest on, just applied here to a killing that happened to already be filming itself.
In a lot of homicide cases, the system has something to work with almost immediately. A suspect with a motive, a relationship to the victim, a story that starts to unravel under questioning. This case was built from the first second to deny investigators exactly that. Two riders, two helmets. A motorcycle model common enough on the streets of Culiacan to be functionally invisible in traffic footage, unless you already know which one you're looking for. No verbal exchange caught on the recording, no plate number confirmed in the released footage. A getaway that folded straight back into rush hour traffic in one of Mexico's most contested cities in under a minute. This is not disorganized violence. Strip away every label and look only at the shape of it. A quiet first pass, a pause, a return, a single shot, an exit. That shape is what widens the investigative gap. The more deliberately a hit is built to leave nothing behind, the longer the state has to operate on inference instead of evidence, while whoever ordered it keeps every advantage that a head start and a contested, cartel-heavy city can buy. Consider the practical reality investigators are working inside of. Culiacan, at the time of this killing, is a city already absorbing a 2-year war between rival factions of its own dominant cartel. Bodies, roadblocks, and firefights are not novelties here. They're a running toll. Every resource the state puts against this single case is competing with every other active investigation the same conflict keeps generating at the same time. That's the gap this chapter is named for. Not a suspect gaming the system, because there's no suspect in custody to game anything, but a system genuinely strained past its capacity to answer every act of violence at the speed the violence is arriving. Here's where the digital trail in this case earns its place in the story, because a second angle changes how deliberate this killing actually looks. A separate video, recovered and reviewed after the attack, shows the same motorcycle, the same two riders, passing the KFC parking lot minutes before the shooting. Not stopping, not engaging, just passing and continuing on. On Gastelum's own livestream audio, in the minute or so before he was killed, one of his companions can be heard reacting to that pass, voicing real, specific unease about the two men on the bike, wanting to leave. The exchange is brief. It's also the clearest evidence in the entire case that whatever was coming had already been set in motion before that motorcycle ever came back. Think about what that timing does to any theory of a random, spontaneous act. A shooting on the first pass looks opportunistic. A motorcycle that circles, leaves, and returns to the same 3 people minutes later looks like confirmation, like the riders needed a second look before they were sure. That's a meaningfully different category of act, and it's the kind of distinction that usually only survives because someone happened to be recording the entire lead-up, for an audience that had no idea what it was about to witness. This isn't unique to this case either.
Recovered footage and recordings, pieced together well after the fact, have become one of the quiet workhorses of investigations like this one, doing analytical work no single witness statement ever could. It took more than a year of accumulated evidence before anyone was taken into custody in Valeria Marquez's case. In this one, the footage hasn't produced a name yet. What it has done is settle a question that matters enormously for how the rest of this investigation gets read. This wasn't chaos. It was a decision made with enough time to reconsider and gone through with anyway. By the next morning, a large security operation was underway across Culiacan. State police, the National Guard, and army units combing the Tres Rios district and beyond, under direct pressure from Mexico City. President Claudia Sheinbaum addressed the killing publicly at her morning press conference, calling for a full investigation and stating plainly that both the shooters and whoever gave the order needed to be found. That response was fast. It was also, by any honest accounting, about 18 months too late. Go back to Chapter 3 for a moment. The flyers naming influencers as cartel-linked started in September 2024. Valeria Marquez was killed on a TikTok livestream in May 2025, a story that made international headlines, that generated exactly the kind of public alarm that's supposed to produce a policy response. And yet, in August 2026, a second young creator, doing the same kind of content in the same kind of public, exposed, phone-in-hand setting, was killed on a live stream again, with no protective protocol, no platform-level early warning system, and no state security plan specifically built around a pattern that, by now, had a name and a body count. There's a smaller, stranger failure worth naming too. The live stream itself, the clearest piece of real-time evidence anyone will ever have of this crime, was taken down by the platform shortly after the shooting. Understandable on one level. No platform wants a graphic killing circulating live to hundreds of thousands of viewers. But it also means the single most valuable piece of footage in this entire case now exists only in second-hand recordings, reviewed by newsrooms and investigators, rather than preserved intact at the source. No one department owns this failure. That's what makes it a systemic one. A year and a half of warning signs, absorbed by a dozen different institutions and translated into protection for no one in particular. Set the wider context aside for a moment and reconstruct only the sequence itself, minute by minute, using nothing but what's been independently reported and reviewed by multiple outlets. 3 friends, dressed in matching orange delivery gear for a live stream bit, in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant during evening rush hour. A first pass by a motorcycle carrying 2 helmeted riders. No contact, no slowing beyond what traffic requires, nothing that would register as a threat to 3 people mid-broadcast, laughing at their own content. Verbal unease from at least one person in the group, audible on the recording in the minute or so afterward. Then the same motorcycle returning. This time it stops. The driver draws a handgun and fires once at close range directly at Gastelum. The bike is already moving again before anyone in the parking lot has processed what happened. Now, the detail that's easy to misread. The orange delivery costumes. It's tempting to treat that disguise as protective, camouflage that should have bought Gastelum anonymity in a crowd. The reconstructed timeline says otherwise. The riders' first pass and their decision to leave and come back indicates they were confirming a specific target, not scanning a crowd for a general one. Whatever the costumes were doing, they weren't hiding César Gastélum from the 2 men who came for him. Their only real effect was on everyone who arrived afterward, police included, who spent the first hours of this investigation looking for a delivery driver who never existed. That's the anomaly this chapter is built to isolate. A piece of evidence that looks, on the surface, like it should complicate the case, and turns out instead to have only complicated the response to it. The killing itself, once you strip away every distraction around it, took 2 passes and roughly a minute to execute from first appearance to getaway. A window built for precision, not panic.
Here's where this documentary has to stop reconstructing the past and be honest about the present. As of this recording, no one has been arrested for the murder of César Gastélum. The case sits with Sinaloa's state prosecutor's office, working alongside Mexico's federal security cabinet. Investigators have said publicly that they're pursuing several lines of inquiry at once: ballistic analysis on the recovered casings, a full canvas of camera footage along the boulevard, and a formal review of Gastelum's own posts for any direct connection to organized crime. That last thread is the most contested, and reporters covering the case have been careful to say so on the record. There is, as of now, no official finding tying his content to a motive. Analysts who track this specific space, where regional content creators sometimes brush up against narco-aesthetic imagery without ever actually representing a cartel, have gone further, warning explicitly against assuming a connection investigators haven't confirmed. It's worth measuring this against the one case in this story that did eventually produce an arrest. Valeria Marquez was killed in May 2025. The man authorities allege ordered the operation behind her murder wasn't taken into custody until this past July, 14 months later. And even then, it was the alleged orderer, not the gunman who pulled the trigger, who was caught. That shooter, more than a year on, has still never been identified. That's the realistic timeline this story is working against. Not the tidy, weeks-long arc of a case where a suspect panics, flees, and gets caught trying to cross a border. A slower, more uncertain one, where the fastest possible outcome is still measured in months, doesn't always reach the person who actually fired the gun, and where the honest answer to who did this is, right now, simply, we don't know yet. In the days after the shooting, people started showing up at that KFC parking lot. Not press, not investigators, just followers. They left candles arranged in rows near the bloodstain on the pavement, the same way mourners have marked a dozen other sites like it across Culiacan over the past 2 years. A few days later, photos from Gastelum's funeral began circulating online, shared by the same community that used to show up for his live streams. Civil society groups in Culiacan have started doing something else, too, putting up their own billboards, aimed squarely at whoever is responsible, demanding an end to the violence, asking, in effect, for their city back. Some of the parents who've joined that call are the same mothers who've spent years searching for children who never came home from this same conflict. There is no verdict to deliver at the end of this one. No sentencing, no extradition, no final scene where the person responsible is led away in handcuffs. What there is, instead, is a number that keeps climbing. At least a dozen social media influencers killed across Sinaloa since the fall of 2024. César Gastélum now added to that list. And a president of Mexico who has publicly promised that both the shooters and whoever gave the order will be found. Whether that promise is kept is a story this documentary can't finish yet. What can be said, plainly, is this. A 24-year-old who spent his career making people laugh was shot in the head while broadcasting to the very audience that made him who he was. And as of tonight, the 2 men who did it are still out there, unnamed, in a city that has learned over and over exactly how long unnamed can last. This is an active investigation. If the people responsible are identified, that's a different documentary. This one ends where the facts currently do, with a case still open and a family still waiting.